Hello, I'm David Kemper, as you may know. I'm coming to you from the set of the Neural Cluster here on stage. What stage is this? 13. Nobody knows. We're on one of the stages at Homebush Bay in Sydney, Australia, and I'm going to talk to you about Season 3 of Farscape.
My name is John Crichton, an astronaut. 3 years ago, I got shot through a wormhole. I'm in a distant part of the universe, aboard this living ship of escaped prisoners, my friends.
It was by design that there was a dark beginning to the year, figuring that this would be a 5-year series all the time. We were right in the beginning of our middle year, and so we wanted it to get very dark and depressing so that we could then start to pull out of it. When you start a season, you know the beginning and you know the end. We knew where we were starting from. We knew that at the end of the year, we were going on to the command carrier, and knew we were going to blow up the command carrier. We knew that Grace and Talon were going to perish heroically. And along the way, we also knew that we were going to be splitting Crichton into two. Other than that, we made things up as we went along. I wrote the season ender of Season 2, and I left writer Ricky Manning in a terrible place. Crichton was bolted to a table with part of his brain out. Erin, our leading lady, was dead, and we knew that the only person that could save Crichton was also dead.
There was an awful lot to do, and we also knew that we were going to bring Erin back, which is kind of a large event. And we also knew at that time that we were going to kind of swap Zan for her, right? That we didn't, going in keeping with the Farscape philosophy that nothing comes for free, everything's got a cost.
Zan would bring Erin back to life, which was not the way it was originally going to go, and that would ultimately cost Zan her life.
Have you come to reassign me?
I have come to take you back.
The wonderful Grunchlick character that David created in 22 was just so good. I just had to find a way of tying him to Scorpius to make the villain still want something, putting Grunchlick under the mental control of Scorpius as, okay, that's it, that's how it'll work. And I knew those two guys would have all sorts of fun playing that, and then they sure did. And it was just one of those, okay, Wayne and Hugh, I'm home. I don't have to write anything intelligent. They'll make me look good.
The title of his episode, Season of Death, became the title of the kind of the overarching series episode title, and it was never designed to be that way. But Ricky was prescient enough to know that, let's see, help me out here. We knew that, see, pieces of the set are falling apart for which I'm going to cop it. Erin started out dead, then Zan was going to die. We knew we were going to split the Crichtons and one of the Crichtons had to die. We knew at the end of the year that Grace and Talon were going to die. Who else died? We lost some. There were
Several writers.
Several writers. Justin Monjo, in May, June of 2000, comes running into my kitchen and says, I just read this great book, Perfect Storm, and I want to do something like it. That was the genesis for Sons and Lovers. We built a space station, and we wanted to go for mood and for darkness. We're lucky to have the head of the creature shop, the Jim Henson Creature Shop, the genius brains behind all the creatures that you've seen since the beginning of Farscape, and who's done lots of other things that he can talk to you about in other interviews. But let's bring out Dave Elsey right now.
We decided that we were going to do a bartender, and we had to think about what I thought the greatest sort of alien bartender we could possibly think of would be. So I thought, well, a bartender with more than 2 pairs of arms would be a great idea. So we did a bartender with 6 arms, I believe.
Because Pilot had 4, and we weren't going to repeat that.
We wanted to go further. Yeah, we always have to go a little bit further each time. We worked out little routines that the puppeteers could do. So one would be mixing drinks, and one would be wiping the bar, and another one would be putting the peanuts out, or whatever the equivalent of space peanuts are. It was a great sort of thing to look at on the set because it was so huge. But the mistake that I made on that was that I designed what really should have been a widescreen character for the small screen, so we couldn't actually get the whole thing on the screen at once.
When I found out in September, October of 2000 that Virginia, therefore the character of Zan, was leaving, I had to conceive of a really heroic end for her. We wanted to give the character a great out. Originally, we were going to plant her in soil. She was going to have disease from saving Aaron, and we were going to plant her on a planet, oxygen-rich soil, and then come back and find her someday. And then we decided it wasn't very heroic to plant your leading lady face down in the ground, which is what we were going to do. There was an idea that had been knocking around since the very, very beginning, where a ship coming out of another dimension merged with our ship, and the bridges were overlapping, and adventure ensues. Into this mix, we threw the fabulous snake, which is still a great special effect that almost bankrupted us and killed Andrew Prowse, who was doing all the CG, as he always has. Part of the idea that Rockme had from the very beginning was this ship was a prison ship. It's not a military ship. So it's a revolving door. People should be coming and going all the time. The original plan, honestly, called for almost all the regulars to come and go. Jewel comes in and is exactly the opposite of what Zan brought in terms of to the palette of colors of our crew. She's fussy and she's a bit high class, who's found herself living on a bad freighter ship on her way to Europe, and she's used to being in the first class cabin, and she's in steerage.
Everything I have seen so far is despicable.
Welcome to the Federation starship SS Buttcrack.
So acts 3 and 4 of Self-Inflicted Wounds were all devoted to the very final act of selflessness that Zan gave to our crew, and it boiled down to the final speech where she has a moment with each of our characters and calls them by their character trait that she felt.
Sensitive Dargo. Exuberant Tiana. Wise Rigel. Selfless Aaron. Innocent Crichton.
She selflessly gave herself as an example, and that, in a way, doomed our crew for the rest of the year to a horrific year of bad things happening to them because they didn't have someone to go to for that calming influence that Zan had provided the show. And at the same time, she gifted them with some part of her that she had been around. This was an admitted attempt. We'd only done one real time travel story, which was Back to the Future, Ep 5 of the first year. We wanted to do another one, and it was reminiscent of all the old Star Treks and all the old other shows of every kind, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, that you've ever seen. And we wanted to put our little stamp on it and do our little twist and have the argument about what to do about time in the middle of it, and end up at the end thinking, we wanted the audience to be going, oh, they solved it. They did it just like every other show. And of course, there's a horrific consequence that we see, which is the nurses and the little girl don't survive. The premise is that if you go back in time, there's just almost no way to go back and set things completely right. What we found under the direction of Peter Andrikidis, he got the show instantly. There was a sense of humor that he brought, and we did not know that Tammy McIntosh, who was playing Jewel, was funny as hell. And she and Anthony, who are old friends, and they made up the stuff about him throwing her through the wall, and we had the drinking of the Phillip urine, and we found, to our delight, that Tammy could handle comedy, and the untold secret of Farscape is that we're a comedy show masquerading as a space show. Tim Ferrier, our production designer, did a phenomenal set. That fort you see is a real fort. We built it on an enormous soundstage, and it was all practical, the stairs, everything. You could run up and down it. It was enormous.
It was a difficult episode logistically to shoot on location because it had been written that it was all night, and from a scheduling point of view, that's, causes problems to go on location. So the decision was made to build a big set, and ever since I've been on this show, my brief has been constantly make it bigger, and I think that's one of the special things about Farscape is that we've set ourselves apart by building, making the show look really big and look cinematic.
We knew we had to split the Crichtons. We knew that from the beginning of the year, and we didn't know where. We could have split them in Ep 5 and Ep 6 and Ep 7, and Matt Ford joins us as a writer, and Matt's the lead singer of a group down here whose name I cannot say on camera. And he's mad in a great, wonderful way in the tradition of Farscape. And he came in and said, I want to do a show about cannibalism. And we all went, oh, great, we haven't done cannibalism. And that seemed to be the perfect way. We started to think, how will we split the Crichtons? And of course, we came up with the device of the guy, Karvok, living on his own on the ship, feeding off the people, replicating them, and it seemed to work. And of course, the episode got darker and darker and darker, a la 2 after the loss of Zan. So this ep presented us with several huge logistic challenges. We used our own set. We used, obviously, our own pilot. But we had to make it look like another Leviathan that had been corroded and being destroyed and eaten from within. And for that, we turned to Dave Elsey. This was a huge ep for you. This was like the first monster ep of the year.
It was huge because we had to deal with pilot being in pieces basically, and having chunks of him already been eaten. We also had to create Karvok, the main character. He also has a thing that he wears on his arm that we also built in the creature shop, because we sometimes build props and things where it comes into sort of our territory. And he has his brain-sucking device, so we had to make that. We had to make it practical so that you could actually stick it into somebody's head, and then you wanted to be able to see the brain fluid drain up. And then we wanted him to stick the spike in his own ear. We wanted to see it go in about sort of 3 inches, and he injects the brain fluid directly back into his own head.
A creature or a costume or a makeup design or even a set isn't just created, well, it's what they wrote on the page. There's a lot of latitude for people to create within that. So when people like Dave create something, then we take it and we adjust the script. We will do a rewrite which completely POs the production office, but we'll do rewrites to reflect things that are given to us by the crew, by the department heads, by the creative geniuses, and then by the actors themselves. It really does highlight how Farscape somehow manages to get pulled together, even, as Dave says, when the clock is relentlessly ticking on us. If we had more episodes, we would have really explored what it was like to have 2 Crichtons on the same ship at the same time. Some of the problems inherent in that, of course, is that since we only have 1 Crichton, you have to shoot him twice and you have to do lots of special effects, and Ben Browder's time is almost completely accounted for with A unit and B unit. He can't shoot twice for the same episode.
It was a daunting episode for a freelancer to do, and just having double Crichtons meant it was double the fun. Our theory is that the audience has seen tons and tons of television, so most of the standard television tricks aren't really going to surprise them, because, yeah, I know, they're going to... So we try and use that to our advantage and say, well, okay, let's let them think they're ahead of us, and then let's do something else. We had one of the Crichtons get injured in a bomb explosion, and I'm sure most of the audience was thinking, okay, they split the Crichtons, and now this is going to be the easy way to get rid of one of them so that we don't have to deal with it next week. And we actually didn't do that. We not only kept both of them alive, we split them apart. One went off with Aaron on Talon, one stayed on Moya, and we kept that run going for, 5, 6, 7 episodes.
The people on Talon were going to get screwed over. They were going to get bumped into by Aaron's mom, and Collarda's, and have a terrible, terrible time. And we knew they were going to lose Crichton in the end, and bad things were going to happen to them. The people on Moya had an easier time. They had kind of lighter eps. Bad things happened to them, but we knew when they reunited, the people on Moya would be going, wow, we can't wait to tell you what kind of adventures we had. And the people on Talon were going to come back and go, well, Crichton's dead, Aaron tried to commit suicide, Crace has been blind, Stark's insane, and Rigel's pissed off. This was a mistake from beginning to end. Actors writing scripts, bad idea, enough said, you've watched it, you probably hate it too, so we move on and talk about Ep 9. No, that's not fair, because a lot of talented people worked on the ep, even though our series star, Ben Browder, wrote it. The genesis of this episode was Ben gave me 3 feature film scripts about 2.5 years ago, right after he was cast. And he said, here, just read these. I'm a writer too. I'm an aspiring writer. And that was it. He never said another word. He never said, can I write one? He never pushed. And I read those scripts, and they were very professional. And more important, they completed. And any writer that completes a script is a writer. To write 2 or 3 of them is astounding. So one day Ben and I were doing a chat, as you guys may know, I think it was out of the BBC. And on the chat, he and I were both on at the same time. I typed to the audience, well, Ben's going to write a script. And he typed back, because we were in different locations, what are you talking about? And when it was over, he called me when the chat was over. He said, are you out of your mind? I said, nah, you should write a script and find out what we go through. We beat the crap out of him, which was really good. He came up with a script like every writer and said, it's great. And we went, no, it isn't. And you had to, like any writer, wrestle him to the ground and show him why things could be changed, and to his credit, he got there ahead of us almost every time. He did a fabulous job, and then the episode was turned over between he and Tony Tills, who worked excellently as a team, as Ben does with everyone, but they really got into this ep together. Ben comes in, and his pitch for the ep was, he said, it was the first ep we were doing on Talon, and he said, Talon gets swallowed by a bulldog. That's all he said. And from then on, we just took off, and we built the characterizations, and Ben really did it himself. He came in with most of the threads of how the triangle between Crace and Crichton would play out. And all I'll say is when he was done, we wished that he could have done another script for us, but he can only do one a year because he has to write it over the break. He's too busy. And the best part was that he would get on the set, and Claudia and Lonnie and Paul would change the dialogue on him, and it was just great to see him with a script where the actors were changing it, and he was going, what are you changing? These are good lines. It was fabulous. And not only that, I think it really pissed him off that Rigel was changing lines. That was the best part of it for me. Rigel changing Ben Browder's lines, and there was nothing he could do about it. We wanted to do a Moya ep, and we had to set up the differences between the two sides, how Crichton was reacting on one side and how Crichton was reacting on the other. This was the hardest part of the season for us, was trying to figure out how to differentiate the two guys, and we left that actually to Ben in the performance. The salient two notes for that episode that you might want to be interested in is Justin had come up with the idea that after this creature, the energy rider, had inhabited Chiana, he said, you know, there should be some change to Chiana. And so we came up with this, the prescience, which continues to get played through even to this day.
No, he's not down there. He's here.
No, he's down in the cluster. How did you know that?
Also, the genesis of the possession of Crichton with the blood coming down. You may have heard the story. We're doing casting, Rockney S. O'Bannon, Brian Henson, the casting people, and we're seeing over 200 actors to play the part of Crichton. And this one really handsome guy comes in and sits down, and we're getting ready, and they're putting a camera on him, much like the camera that's shooting us right now. And he's sitting there, and unbeknownst to him, a pore on his forehead opens up, and blood begins to roll down the center of his nose. And he said later that he thought it was sweat, so he didn't say anything. We all are watching this drop of blood roll down his nose and wondering when he's going to dab it. And it becomes apparent that he doesn't know. So Rockney S. O'Bannon, creator of the show, says, it doesn't even know his name. It just says, you have blood. And Ben goes, what? It never happened to him before. So it was very prophetic for the series. Relativity. And what we did is we tapped series creator Rockney S. O'Bannon. I talked to him and said, he's working on pilots and features, and I said, we can't lose you from the show, even though he's based in the States. No one knows the show better than he does. So he said that he would write 3 scripts. We wanted to do the Mom ep, and he said, I want that one. And what we had was Mom come in, we had the Collardas come in, we had to make a planet, we had to make a jungle on a planet in a soundstage, which I think Tim Ferrier is still
reeling,
vibrating over, because it's very difficult to do and make it real. Linda's tremendous performance with Claudia, and how Claudia, the two of them just lit up the screen. And I remember Ben and Lonnie crawling through mud and crawling through stuff while the ladies were getting the great dialogue scenes. These guys were playing in the mud. Linda Cropper was so fabulous that this is what we do. We just kind of throw everything that we were planning out and say, well, she's so good, we can't kill her off at the end. Originally, Rock was going to kill her at the end of Ep 10, and we decided to let her stay, if I remember correctly, because we wanted to use her again. We knew we had great talent, and we were going to play with it. So Rockney had come up with the Scorpius character back in 1993, and but not necessarily conceived the way he is now. And Ricky took on the challenge in the first year, created Scorpius, and after that, he just came into the writing room one day and said to everybody, you know, we ought to do a day in the life of Scorpius.
Well, I just thought it was strange that we were here in the middle of season 3 and we hadn't done an episode featuring the hero of the series. You know, he was always like doing these little guest things and whatever, and these other people, these non-essential people like Ben and Claudia were doing all the work.
You said the hero of the series.
Absolutely. I think he is. You know, he's certainly the smartest person on the series. David argues with every other day. David says Scorpius is the smartest person in the entire show, and then on the alternate days, Rigel's the smartest one of the show. So that shows you where his sympathies lie. And it was fun to do an episode where we got into his past and kind of at least had a little bit of a look at the forces that made him what he was. Like, we didn't really get into Teen Scorpio very much. We would have loved to have brought Claudia Carvin back to do an Atira and show how they got together. And but it's only an hour show, and we couldn't exactly do 44 minutes without seeing any of the other people. Again, those non-essential people like Dargo and Gianna and all that. So, but I think it was a lot of fun to do, and it gave Wayne a chance to really show some more of his stuff. And also Creature Shop, who gave us our first female Scarron of the series.
Everybody brings their own predilections and their own tastes and likes. Ricky has always been kind of the keeper of the Scarron Scorpius Peacekeeper story. A lot of it comes out of his brain. He says, well, it's about time we service that. It's about time we went back. So a lot of the unspooling of the greater arc of Scarrons and Peacekeepers and Scorpius's part in that comes from Ricky. Matt Ford had come in and said he had been out with some friends camping, and late at night he was sitting out watching one of those bug zapper lamps, and he watched a mosquito fly around. No, it was a moth. He watched a moth fly around the zapper and get its wings singed by the electrical crackling, and it kept flying around, and I had to hurt, but it was fascinated, and finally the bug flew into the thing and got killed. So Matt came in and said, what makes an animal do that, go to its death, even when every instinct says it should resist that? That became the genesis of Meltdown. We decided to have Talon be the moth and be inexorably drawn. We had to figure out why, how. We created the sun god, if you will, and he came up with Siershna. And it was a chance for us to explore the Talon side of the crew in a different way without having Mom there. What I remember is we got all excited about finding the vestigial pilot room in Talon that would have housed a pilot had Talon grown into a full Leviathan instead of a hybrid warship. In effect, Talon didn't need a pilot because Krace became the pilot. That episode showed off Paul Goddard. He is one of my personal favorite actors, and giving him a strong part in that episode was a real smart thing for us to do. And it just showed us his range in a way that we hadn't seen before. Scratch and Sniff is probably, in retrospect, tied as my favorite episode of the year. When we started to do this, we were looking within our writing circle about who would write this. Lily Taylor was essentially the first person working directly with me when I got to Australia way back in May, even January, I think we met, of '98. This was her second script for us, probably not her last. And tell everybody what it's like to write a script for Ricky and Justin and myself and the directors.
Ooh, even knowing the characters as well as I do, it was exceptionally difficult. The actors in particular know the voice of their characters so well that they're very protective of it. So you feel like you're constantly under the gun to get it right. And I just pity anyone coming in to try and write the show from scratch, because it's, there is that many characters and they're all so great that, it's a difficult process.
Tony Tills got a hold of this one and decided that he was going to make it serious, and because of the comedy aspects, turned it into a bit of Austin Powers.
Originally, I had a very dark concept in my head, and I've worked with Tony, for many years, and so was very comfortable with him doing it. And so when he came on, he read the script and had the idea for the Austin Powers theme, which totally took it in another direction. Ended up being a great direction, but it was interesting at the time for each of the departments to go from really dark to sort of almost 60s high camp.
I remember Tony saying something, it's a quote like, it's right in between. And what he meant was what Lil was just speaking to. It was very dark and dramatic. You had these girls, our Chiana and Jewel, being threatened and people dying. And you had tremendous comedy, and Tony had done both. And we decided, we were all in the rough cut, and Tony decided, let's freeze frame, put some supers up, let's have some fun with it.
Does this guy just scream Vegas or what?
Every year we've had Ben Browder's wife, Francesca Buller, who's a phenomenal actress on her own, guest star and play a different part every year. And Lil had conceived the part of Raxel, the Gonif, and I said to Lil, what do you think about Fran, and Lil was writing the script and jumped up and down and said, "Oh my God," because we know she can nail any part we give her. We had a lot of fun letting Ben and Anthony manhandle her, throw her against the wall, beat her up, much as she does to Ben at home. So we thought it was good payback.
The first brief we had to do was, we were supposed to be revisiting Dambada, which had been established in the first season, but none of the locations that had been shot on that in that episode were available. So we had to start again, really. Originally there was going to be a big escape with Crichton's module, which didn't actually eventuate, but someone came up, I suspect it might have been myself, with the solution of the Mad Max chase sequence in the buggies. From the start of those double episodes, we were going to, the intention was we were going to make it a big bang show. And our wonderful special effects department did indeed blow the set up down in the sand dunes. And fortunately, we were able to rebuild it quickly.
Aaron and Crichton were heading toward a collision, and we were going to have to pay it off. They were going to have to fall in love. They were going to have to consummate their relationship in a metaphysical sense, if not a physical sense. And how do you do that in a series without destroying the tension that goes on between the actors? We hit upon the idea of separating, making two Crichtons, letting Aaron fall in love with one. They have a perfect relationship, and then of course, he's doomed from that moment on. If you know drama, he's dead. And once he's dead, it allows us to reset the relationship when Aaron comes back and looks at Crichton and goes, "I can't do this again." Well, in that moment of the Crichton's death, to everyone, both Crichtons were real. Ben had succeeded in separating them into two different people, and Aaron only knew that one Crichton, and she was in love with him. And so the man that died in her arms was really John Crichton. We were able, on the one hand, to have our lead actor play a death scene for real. It wasn't a dream. We had our lead actress lose the man that she loved. This one is still one of the spine-chilling scenes that we'll have ever in this series. And we were also able to reset the relationship. The two people you're looking at were the only two people for the first year of that episode who actually said this can be done.
There's actually only one of us. He thought it could be done.
Well, but you did
I
too.
just went along for the ride.
He went along for the ride and never
worth
told
the
me
risk.
that he thought that I was full of crap.
Neither of us knew a great deal about cartoons before we started that. We watched everything Chuck Jones had ever done. We became authorities on how to do
the comic timing.
Comic timing. And even then we'd enter into huge debates about what kind of gags worked, what kind of didn't. What's your favorite gag? What's your favorite gag? Why does it work? Why does it not work?
For animation, we turned to Yoram Gross Studios, which to my knowledge is the largest single animation production house in the southern hemisphere of the whole world. Yoram Gross Studios.
Southern hemisphere of the whole world.
Of the whole world, of our world. There are other worlds out there, and if you don't believe, you don't belong on the show. We thought they were going to do the work, and they did, but they kept saying, but who's the director? And we realized, oh goodness, that's what Chuck Jones did, and Andrew realized partway into the process that he was Farscape's Chuck Jones.
We didn't actually have a whole script for the whole thing. We had a number of scripts for the cartoon segments, but we weren't quite sure how they fitted with the rest of it.
That's kind of a Farscape trademark, not having the whole
It's kind of a trademark in the way that you and I work together. That's true. So we're making these cartoon things kind of in isolation, but with a vague idea about where we're going and what we're doing. So I suddenly found myself having to approve designs. I'd say, I keep going into meetings at Yoram Gross and saying, if I say yes to this, does this mean I can change my mind later? And they'd say, yes, but the next time you come in, you'll have to say yes forever. Or I'd go and look at an animatic. An animatic is one of those little things that gives you the timing of the cartoon before you see the whole thing. I'd look at an animatic and I'd say, is this it? And they'd say, no, you can still have another go at it. And we'd have another go at it. And finally I'd say, yeah, I think that's it. And we'd lock it off, and away they'd go, because it all happens afterwards. And this is before we had a whole script, so we have no idea how this is going to fit with everything else. We kept also shooting live action bits that were supposed to be like cartoons. And there's a wonderful bit where Anthony does the walk down the walkway. To
Steps on the rake and the trap and the
bear
bucket.
trap and all that stuff to get to Crichton, who's in the chair with the burning cigar. And, how do you play that? Is that real, or is that live action cartoon, or is it supposed to be funny? Do you play it funny, or do you play it serious? There was an endless debate with Anthony about how you played funny.
Essentially, we looked at Roger Rabbit and we said, we got to do a Roger Rabbit. We got to have Claudia and Ben in a scene, and Claudia's going to be a cartoon and Ben will be playing Crichton. How do you do that?
When you do this stuff, the interaction between between the live action and the animated action, whether it be computer animation or just ordinary old drawn animation, is the crucial bit. And that bit where Crichton takes the pencil and rubs her out and she takes the pencil, that's where you start running into crossover problems. So that was a bit of a challenge. We hadn't done that before.
We had seen the rough cut when we saw it without the cartoon, then we saw it with the cartoon, and there were still a lot of people who were ready to say, "I told you so, guys."
And it wasn't really until I saw the final mix, when all the bits came together, that I knew that it worked. I just looked at the final mix, huge sigh of relief. The music was phenomenal. Guy Gross won an award in Australia for that music, and he deserved it too.
God, I love science fiction.
We're really proud of it, and we're smiling rather smugly. There's a lot of people that told us that it couldn't be done, and I think that motivated us more than the...
It's a good motivation, isn't it?
It's a great motivation, and we're smiling. So now we've had this wacky cartoon app, and Justin Monjo he had said from the beginning of the year when he knew that Crichton was going to die, he said, "I don't think we should bring Aaron and Crichton back, the other Crichton, back together. I think I want to do an episode just for Aaron where she is so distraught we deal with the ramifications of her losing the man she loves." The set that Tim built for that hotel was outrageously good. And then you had Claudia showing what she can do, what kind of an actress she is, just a tremendous performance. You had great performances from the puppeteering crew, from Jonathan Hardy as the voice of Rigel, from Paul and from Lonnie. We decided that we were going to bring back a man masquerading as Aaron's father, Talon, and he was going to bring back with him a seer. And Justin had always said it was going to be the guy was carrying a bowling ball bag, and you'd open the bag and there'd be a creature. Well, nobody bothered to tell Justin, specifically me, that was impossible, that you were never going to get a creature that small that could be really believable, that would really work. Then Justin went and talked to Dave Elsey, who's back with us here, and Dave made a liar out of me.
I knew that this was going to be a Rowan episode. Rowan was going to direct it, Rowan Woods. And I know that Rowan has a pretty warped imagination. So I started to think, what could we do that would be good for Rowan, And we came up with what you see in the film, the sort of four-eyed fetus creature.
The seer in this episode was my favorite creature. It startled me. I saw it and I was like, people said, "You've got to come down and see this thing. It's so real." It's sitting right outside of Dave's office. It's unplugged, if you will, but it's there, and it may make an appearance again. Such a remarkable creature. When you see it, you realize why Farscape is as it is.
This is a huge episode because we also had Talon. We worked out this really lopsided, kind of crab-like, spider-like insectoid head with multiple eyes on one side, and then we left it pretty normal on the other side. And all those legs, originally we were going to mechanize as well. They were all going to move, but we just ran out of time on that one, so we stopped. And it's probably a good job too. Yeah. Apart from that, we also had to fill a room with aliens because that planet had to be populated with aliens. We only normally have about 2 weeks from when we hear about the things on the show to when we actually we're shooting it. So what tends to happen is that my first ideas end up on the screen, so it's not like we go through millions and millions of designs, or we try out lots of different things. Usually the very first thing that we think of spills out on the screen, good, bad, indifferent, whatever it happens to be, hopefully good.
We had one episode to bridge the separation of the two Crichtons, the two crews, bring them together. Again, this is why we want 30 eps a year. I would have liked to have had 3 episodes to explore it, but we had 1 episode and we had to propel this thing forward into the 4-part ender. This ep will be defined for me by 2 things. Rigel and his girlfriend. Now, remember, there's a whole slew of puppeteers that work Rigel. And when they're working Rigel, they're busy. And if they're working another puppet, they're not working Rigel. So all of a sudden, we have Pilot and 2 Hynerians working in the same room. Plus, Rockne designs this creature, which is exploded apart and is dripping off the walls and still communicating.
The boolite was a problem because we really didn't know what we were building, you know, and nobody could really describe to it, and it hadn't really, at the point that we were chatting about it.
It was, how could you describe exploded person?
Well, we were talking
That's
about
what we
it
described.
before there was actually even a script to talk about, you know, so it was all theory anyway. So the first thing I did was start to sculpt, you know, like a head and then a bit of body and the big breakthrough was that we realized that we didn't have to do anything specific, and that it actually, the less specific we were, the better it was. So, and this is the first creature that we've ever designed that turned up set in a bucket.
I had said to the whole writing staff, I want to do that scene from Heat, where De Niro and Pacino meet in a diner. One's a federal agent, one's a criminal. The Fed knows the crim's going to do a crime, and they kind of talk about it ahead of time, and it's basically catch me if you can. And I wanted Rigel to meet with Scorpius, as Ricky says, who I think are the two smartest people, and they're going to have a negotiation about how Crichton and company can go on to the command carrier and not instantly be incarcerated. No one could get a handle on this until Matt Ford called me up one Saturday night and said, what if Heat turned into Dog Day Afternoon right in the middle of the thing?
I got a visit from Ricky Manning, who came into the shop to see what was going on, and he was being very comedic in the workshop, and so he went away, and over lunch, we had an hour, I sculpted two creatures that weren't really creatures. They were kind of humanoid. They were going to be blue. They were kind of trailer park trash, essentially. That's what I wanted them to look like. And we gave one of them a mullet, and, you know, and one of them a sort of curly hair and sideburns and all sorts of things. And essentially, well, I ripped off one of our producers. Do you want to say who?
Crace knew that if you go onto the command carrier, you're gonna get screwed. Scorpius is gonna get you. So he came up with this plan. Essentially, Talon blew up a hospital ship with innocent people, including the Scarran that we lost, Naj Gill. Crace actually sacrificed those innocent people in order to get us to neuter Talon, to basically disengage his cannon, so that Scorpius, that's the only way Scorpius would let that ship on to the command carrier, and he knew that he was going to need that later. This was Crace's, beginning of the beginning of the end of his heroic arc, his journey from really arch villain in episode 1 to our people's savior at the end. Essentially, the idea that I'd always had in my head is a tale of two cities. Really, Crace and Aaron had a lot going on here. They were going back literally to the home, possibly the place that Aaron was born, to old friends and old loves, and to a world that no longer existed for them. And we wanted to explore that.
I think it was good because it was the first time, other than sort of episodes 1 and 2 of series 1, when we went to a totally peacekeeper environment, wasn't it? It was the first time we saw sort of their rank and strata, their training, and it was just a sort of to show that where they came from.
What do you see in your head when we're looking at this sketch for design? What do you already know?
You sort of don't know until you actually source it all.
Oh, yes,
but you think you can.
See, I would have thought I would have guessed you were going to say I know the whole thing.
No, well, you think of a texture or a something that flows or something that's sort of rigid, and then you don't say I definitely want that, because there's a whole big world out there. So you find what's out there and then adapt it to work for what you've got on paper.
Is there any leather left in Australia after that episode?
It might still be on the hoof, I think.
7,000 cubic meters of water was going to come cascading down into the shot while there was fire, with live actors without stunt people, climbing stairs no less, wearing leather.
Every single person from the office was down there to watch it, because there was one go at it. And if it didn't work, or if Wayne slipped over, or if it went through the wall, I mean, there were so many variables that we just couldn't, all sorts of terrible things could have happened. And that was it. If it had gone wrong, well, it would have been undoable again, probably. And it went off perfectly. I mean, I don't think anyone could have imagined how terrific it ended up looking.
We get to the end of this massive two-parter, and it taxed the whole company. It really kind of gave closure to Crace. It sent him out a hero. It put Crichton and Scorpius on a new relationship. They're sitting across the chasm, taking off the bracelets, and Scorpius isn't trying to kill Crichton, and Crichton isn't trying to kill Scorpius. They've reached a new plateau in their relationship, which would have to be explored as we go forward. And that leads us inexorably to the last episode. Dilemma. We have just had the single greatest piece of physical action and emotional trauma, but physical action that we've ever done on the show. Now, I happen to fly, I'm in LA because I'm still working, just had been working with Rock, who was doing the episode 21, and I have to write episode 22. And I have this idea, which no matter how I do it, it's too big. It wants to be a two-parter. Then I'm thinking it'll be episode 22 and episode 1 from year 4, and it's starting to paralyze me. I'm tired. It's been a long year. Maybe a week and a half before we're supposed to shoot. I was sitting in bed, and I said to my wife, I'm going to fail here because I'm going to have to write an ep that I don't think is the best ep that I could write. And I realized at that point that my little tiny sea story, it was only supposed to be 2 scenes, was Crichton fantasizing about a wedding. And I realized that that wouldn't go away. In all the permutations of replotting the story, the wedding was always there. And it was the thing I was most excited about. And I sat up in bed at 4 in the morning, scared the heck out of my wife and the dogs who were sleeping in the room. And she said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "I know what the answer is." I got out of bed, I ran into the other room, and I started writing. And I finally got the script in and then flew down to Sydney. And that's when the script really started to be made.
I loved it because you were on the emotional track.
Right.
And I always figured it had to be for Crichton as big emotionally as the choice was for Aaron.
Right.
It had to be a Crichton ending, it had to be a big emotional ending for him. And I figured you were finally in an area that I could latch onto.
The parable dog with 2 bones, which has always been in my head, Crichton is the dog with 2 bones. I mean, he wants to go home and he wants this girl and he's thinking that won't work together. And what we did was show a graphic representation of what was going on in his head, that it was impossible to have both of these dreams. The wedding scene and the very last scene were supposed to be about 3 minutes long. Andrew decides to shoot the wedding, shoot him up in slow motion, and the last scene, because Ben and Claudia and Andrew really made it work, we ended up with, how many
Kind
minutes?
of stretched a bit.
But how many minutes?
That scene runs about, how long does that scene run? About
Well,
5 minutes. So we called upon our editor, and our editor is a man by the name of Nick Holmes, and he is brilliant. He did a brilliant job with this episode. This episode was a surplus of interesting and fabulous material, which Nick had to construct so that it made a kind of emotional sense.
Do you love John Crichton? Not him. Not me. John Crichton.
I did more rewrites of the scene than I've ever done for anything on Farscape. Ben wasn't right with it, Claudia wasn't right with it, I wasn't right with it, Andrew wasn't right with it, and we went around and around. We were alternately strident with each other and at the same time collaborative at the same time, all desperate, knowing that if this scene didn't work, the whole year fell to crap.
It's more an indication of how much we wanted it to work. The stridency was an indicator of how badly we wanted this scene to work. We're shooting this scene on the last day. This is the last scene on the last day.
And if it screws up the whole season...
If it screws up, we've screwed the whole thing.
I'm sitting with Ben and Claudia says, I don't know, it has to do with fate, because I had talked about fate, and Claudia said, well then, maybe it should be taken out of our hands. Maybe it should be a coin toss. And I'm forever grateful for Claudia for that. And when I finally went home and rewrote the script and it came in with the coin toss, Claudia was like, just totally...
She was 3 inches taller.
She was 3 inches taller and stoked, and she should be, because it solved our main dilemma. And then we push into the tag, where Crichton says goodbye to everybody. You get Scorpius revealing to Crichton what the old lady had been whispering to him, that Aaron is pregnant. And then when it can't get any worse, a wormhole opens up, Deus Ex Machina, and swallows Moya away, leaving Crichton with no fuel, all by himself, sitting out in the middle of darkness. And when Andrew and I went through the logistics of the end, we started laughing because we knew we were going to make the year, and we also knew that we thought we might have you, the audience, interested in what would happen in the following year. From Sydney, Australia, on the set of the Neural Cluster inside Moya, 4 feet off the ground, with bells in the background, we say good night, goodbye, and thank you for being a fan of Farscape.